Hello, and welcome to the webinar on 2023, the next year of application security. My name is Frank Catucci. I'm the Chief Technology Officer and Head of Security Research here at Invicti Security. I've been in the AppSec and technology world for over 20 years. I've had a wide variety of roles in that time. I've been the practitioner. I've been a pen tester. I've been the person in charge of product and application security programs for very large technology companies. I've worked in education and have quite a bit of background working security tooling and engineering in finance and fintech operations as well. Right now, as mentioned, I'm the CTO and head of security research at Invicti. And thank you all for joining us today as we go on this adventure of what is coming next and what should we be concentrating on in the year 2023 and beyond with application security. Today's agenda is going to focus on three different areas. First being the biggest cybersecurity concerns that are coming and what I believe to be a source of concentration and awareness for 2023 and beyond. Emerging trends, perhaps what is trending, especially from our data-driven approach to find out exactly what those trends show when we are analyzing current findings as well as potential patterns in existing findings. And staying ahead of cyber threats, meaning what are we going to have to do to stay ahead of that next big threat? What are some of the best practices and hygiene things that we can perform on our side as defenders to be prepared properly for cyber threats? Invicti at a glance. Invicti Security has been an application security leader in global InfoSec since 2005. Invicti is the convergence of two companies, NetSparker and Akunetics, both of which you may be familiar with. Just to give you a brief history, our headquarters are currently in Austin, Texas. We have over 400 employees, over 3,600 customers, but almost 1 million apps secured. I think the big part there is when we look at the amount of applications and data that we have from those 1 million applications that we've scanned and secured, we really get a unique insight into a lot of the different type of vulnerabilities, the counts, the methods, the findings, the signatures, etc. We can develop a great amount of wealth of resource on that data and trends. One thing to note is that our current offerings are currently software composition analysis, so SCA, interactive AST testing, so IAST, as well as dynamic, so DAST. We are obviously the leader in DAST, but we do have those other offerings as well, and we plug in and automate throughout your SDLC. Let's start with the biggest cybersecurity concerns. So today we look across these numbers, right? And the numbers are telling. We used Wakefield Research Group, as previously mentioned in one of my other webinars, and we polled 500 DevSecOps professionals. Again, those professionals had a minimum of 5 years experience in DevSecOps or DevOps, and these, I would say the verticals that were taken into consideration were from government, healthcare, financial, and education sectors. And I will say that all of these organizations had at least 2,000 employees. So we are talking about seasoned cyber and AppSec professionals working in DevOps, dev and security primarily, to give us this data and the amount of confidence that we have using this data in conjunction with our study with Wakefield Research. Now, the telling part here is that if you look at this as a glance, there's no one giant outlier. And I think there's a reason for this. We say, what are the biggest cybersecurity of your concerns heading into the next 5 years? I think we all can agree that phishing is going to be a top one, as email is not going anywhere. Sure, we're all adopting Slack and other methods of communication for work productivity, but email is something that's not going away. And as such, phishing is going to remain a very prevalent and hard to block type of attack, and also have a very wide range and reach, meaning that I could spam or send emails to your entire organization, and all I need is one click for a successful phishing attempt. That being said, we're seeing increased attacks as well in smishing or SMS phishing, as well as phishing through other instant message or private message services that may be available or interface into your organization, such as chatbots, etc. Denial of service. Depending on the vertical you're in, I think this would be much more targeted, right? If you're in the government or financial sector, you may be much more targeted with the denial of service attack. So that may also explain that. Cryptojacking, meaning that, with the fluctuations in value of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, free compute. So if I can breach or target an instance in your cloud or an instance in your data center that's not secured, I could actually install crypto miners and have your compute that you're paying for on AWS or Azure, etc., doing that crypto mining for me. So again, a very large impact on the bills that come from your cloud provider, which are not nominal. Ransomware, especially in the healthcare and education sectors, as well as the rest, but I think ransomware there is really targeting a lot of legacy applications. So if you are running legacy applications in production, legacy web applications, legacy anything that is not pretty much up to date and patched, those are targeted first. And ransomware, being that encryption of your files with having to pay ransom to get them back, is very, again, a major threat. I think the other two the next two are really more targeted. So the malware attacks can have another wide net, meaning that we could do things like drive-by or be used in conjunction with things like phishing for points of entry, and the same with ransomware. So that states there that basically could be an entry point for the others. Cyber espionage, I would say, you're always under view, meaning that if you're a government entity, if you're finance, etc., you're always going to have competitors, and you're always going to have things like APTs to contend with for that espionage piece. Now, if we look at all of these things to the left, all of these things may or may not basically flow into this last category, being data theft. Now, data theft is extremely important because all of these attacks to the left can lead into data theft. And most of the folks that we talk to, their data and their customers' data in which they house is their crown jewels of the assets. And that's really what we need to protect. So just to reiterate here, these are not very surprising, but what I think is telling is the fact of the almost equal share from left to right here, all resulting in the culmination of that data theft piece, right? That largest sector. So each method or delivery of type of attack, with perhaps the exception of denial of service and cryptojacking, all leads to that data theft piece. So those are things that are on your colleagues and your coworkers' minds going forward for the next 5 years of their major concerns. Emerging trends to watch out for. This is one I want to take a look at a higher glance. So I'm going to be breaking up the majority of the rest of this webinar into these 4 different emerging trends and why I think they're going to be critical for 2023 and beyond. Those are SBOMs, challenges around APIs, improved security tooling and process, primarily within DevOps, and then DaaS solutions and budgets decisions that need to be moved forward for 2023 and beyond. So the first one here I want to take a minute to focus on is the growing importance of SBOMs and stricter regulations. There's executive orders from the United States government. There are release guidelines as well that state SBOMs are mandatory and be mandated in the standard practice by 2025, basically, for everybody. Now, what I mean by everybody is currently the executive orders state that if you provide any type of service to a federal entity or contracted federal entity, you need to have the SBOM in place that basically gives a full inventory of all of the libraries and dependencies that go into your software. Now, if we're stating that this will be standardized by 2020, let's take a look at what that's going to entail. So right now we're talking about things like the software security supply chain. We know the supply chain attacks are being taken advantage of, right? We know that things like SolarWinds attacks, things that if we look for in the past, like Log4j, Text4Shell, et cetera, these are all pieces that are detectable and listable in your SBOMs, meaning that if someone has your SBOM and they know exactly what version of these files you're using and a vulnerability comes out, they can tell if that product is affected immediately. And that provides them much greater response capability to deliver a patch or a fix in a very, very more expedient amount of time, reducing the overall attack surface and time that you are exposed. I think what we can see here is I will go beyond saying 2025 for 60% of orgs. I think that what we're going to see is a very, very strict type of adoptance. And what I'm saying there is that as the government regulations and increasing regulations on compliance, maybe SOC 2s and ISOs, and things of that nature, but also HIPAA and PCI, et cetera, I think we're going to see a pattern of much greater adoption for these type of rules, these type of SBOMs being delivered and having these vulnerabilities not be exposed in existing product. So I think that the Biden administration, the executive orders, and these guidelines are really going to start to trickle down from government through all of private enterprise and through all really publicly and privately held institutions going forward, probably for I would say the next 5 years or so. And this is going to be something that's going to become standard. So if you're not doing something currently to make sure that you are generating an SBOM, such as running something like an SCA tool, that you're going to want to make sure that you focus on having those capabilities to do so in the next few years before it's mandated or pushed down to you through some kind of legal or compliance regulation. Next, API security challenges. Now, every application that is out there currently, maybe not every, but almost every application. Now, this Akamai report data, 83% of all web traffic is now APIs. I would say that that's conservative, meaning that, yes, I agree with that. But if we look at all of the other traffic that's out there, essentially that is routes or basically capabilities to delivering you additional data via an API. So the remaining, let's say 17% of that traffic is probably still interfacing or calling an API at some point to deliver you the data you're looking for. The interconnective type of nature of all web services and applications right now, especially with the boom and drive of mobile devices and things like tablets and phones and Android and iPhones, et cetera, are that everything that you do basically it functions as an API. I think what this also states is the convergence, meaning convergence of different things that we look at from the cloud nature of security as well. So a lot of cloud is using interconnected APIs to cross service traffic and service to service traffic. So not only your north-south, but also your east-west traffic. And all of that traffic has the same, if not additional exposure that we would look at from a web application. And so that is one thing to note here is that API security, and that is making sure that your APIs are secure and making sure that you are testing actively your APIs on a manual basis, as well as DAST, as well as from any other different type of schema review or security tooling that you need, making sure that your API traffic is secure, making sure that your calls are secure, making sure that you're not vulnerable to IDOR attacks or things of that nature within APIs. Those are going to be very, very much on the forefront going forward for the next 5 years. And as we look at the kind of overlap of things like cloud native application development and cloud security mingling with a lot of the pieces for application security traditionally, we know that APIs are going to be vital to the security and status of these services. Now, testing your REST-based APIs or your GraphQL APIs with a security tool like a DAST solution regularly and continuously is very, very, I would say, recommended, but also doing continuous discovery of your API and understanding where your ghost or your hidden API functionality may or may not reside is going to be key as well. And we know that 70%, this is where I'm going to end this slide, but 70% of all incidents and 40% of all breaches stem from attacks on web apps. APIs play a huge factor there, and that's what you need to understand, especially since most of that traffic of that 70% is API traffic these days. Okay, so the push towards cloud security. One thing that I mentioned here earlier were two things. One would be the SBOM, and two would be things like the APIs that I mentioned. Now, if we're looking at cloud security from that perspective alone, right, the perspective that really is more of a DevOps perspective, let's talk about SBOMs, not just for your applications, but any container that may be orchestrated within your cloud environment, whether regardless of the orchestration you're using, your containers, whether you're using Docker, et cetera, any of the containers you're using in that cloud environment require an SBOM just like your application. Now, the SBOM for those containers is now overlapping the gap of saying that my application has X components that may or may not be vulnerable, here are the licenses, et cetera. Where now is you're talking about the containers you ship that are a part of your product also have to be broken down to look at the open source components, libraries, dependencies, et cetera, to make up that SBOM for those containers. They're not always one and the same. So that's another area where we're looking at the overlap. I mentioned APIs as well. Now we have things like CWPP, we have CNAP, we have so many different other workload protections and cloud protections that are really overlapping there. Not to mention things like CASB or the cloud access security brokers looking for that publicly accessible cloud data and securing that as well. But we have these emerging type of technologies that are overlapping and continue to do so with application security and DevOps, and I believe will grow strong in the next 3 to 5 years to blur those lines as well. DAST driving decisions. Now, this one I would say that it comes straight from not only data from Wakefield, not only data that we have, but a lot of this data comes directly from our latest research project, being our AppSec indicator report. And we're seeing much more shift to people having to really show return on investment and understand that their tools and their spending are being scrutinized. Now, that being said, showing a ROI is a lot easier depending on the tools you're using. Having a continuous AppSec program that doesn't take a break, essentially, that is working kind of in a dynamic and kind of ever progressing fashion is much easier to show trending and analysis in the amount of cycles reduced and or the amount of work that is being saved with automated tooling. Again, automated tooling, yes, using APIs, yes, we need to secure them, but automation is going to be key, and key for every piece of the application security, let's say DevOps pipeline or SDLC. Now, showing that ROI, we have to be able to show that. We have a greater convergence of tools. We have greater budget scrutiny. Even though the budgets are growing for AppSec, as we see from our data in 2023, I believe that with current market trends, the scrutiny will be multiplied beyond just the tracking of the ROI, but it will be making sure that those budgets are justified in the exact tooling that you're using. So, essentially understanding that we need automation, we need integration, we need to integrate into the SDLC, integrate seamlessly into the CI/CD, be very dev friendly and dev centric, and much to, I would say, to the most importance of that is have a close to zero false positive rate as you can. As with anything, developers are developing quicker. We are scanning quicker. We are needing to give feedback quicker. We can't stall pipelines for a large amount of time. We need to be able to deliver very, very expediently. And in doing so, it's even more important to be accurate. Any I would say inaccuracy or false positive in that data is going to increase the risk of the lack of trust or use, and also impact your ROI as those cycles are wasted and are most definitely going to be tracked. All right, staying ahead of your cyber threats. Now, again, we take a look here, and this again comes from the AppSec indicator. What else could you say that DevOps professionals need to concentrate on in the next 5 years to stay ahead of the curve? Increased management buy-in, sure. Developing security directly into the operations and development. That second one to me hits home. Now, you need the first one to build the second one, right? If you need that management buy-in to create the ability to build security directly in, but really what we're looking at here, that 42%, that's like, that one is the one that should be standing right in front of you. That's the one that you're looking at to say, how are we going to build security directly in without hindering and basically enabling the speed in which we release and not slowing things down, being dev friendly, being accurate, etc. So we know that, yes, there are skills gaps that exist out there, right? We know that AppSec is a very tight area to try to scope, to try to hire in. Not only do security professionals have to know security, but they have to understand the code for the most part. So we're looking again there at staff that is either security staff that has the ability to look at or understand code, or we're looking at developers now that are having an interest in security, and we're curating them into security or AppSec professionals. So I would say that hiring that more security staff is much more difficult with application security, just because of the convergence of disciplines that are required there. And even more so moving into the automated function and things like for that second line, building security directly in, and you have to understand how those things work. Developer training is going to be, I would say, another, fairly high growth area in the next 3 to 5 years. However, I feel like this one is going to be an integrated approach, meaning perhaps integrated within an IDE or integrated within an actual code review of your code, rather than these, more formal like CBT computer-based training sessions and those type of things. I think we're going to see more interactivity there. And I think that's a good thing, because sometimes the complacency and boredom can set in when you're looking and watching videos and answering questions. So I think that more integrated approach is going to work. Tooling is always going to get better, as well as vendors. So every year that goes by, we see this explosion of new vendors and explosion of new capabilities. And that's good, because it keeps everybody moving. But the thing not to lose focus on there is that the existing vendors as well are getting better, meaning that we're getting pushed by customers, we're getting pushed by competitors. We're always improving our technology and tools. And I think most of the vendors are looking to do that and competing to do that also. So even though training and process will trump tools, tools are vital to being able to do and deliver these type of things in a very automated and scalable fashion in enterprise, modern enterprise. This is just a brief explanation. Everyone's probably familiar with what I mentioned earlier as far as the automation of tools within the CI/CD, if you will. This is an example of a pipeline. We know that there's a lot of things that can occur in the pipeline, right? A lot of different kind of testing that can occur in the pipeline. Yes. Do you want interactive IDE testing? Yeah, sure. I would love to have a developer do real-time or ad hoc SaaS testing within their IDE. Great. It's native. It's their tool. It's what they're used to. They're in it every day. That's great. And then we shift a little bit. Okay, so that's all the way on this left side of things. Then what? Perhaps we look at SCA, right? We need to build those SBOMs. We need to make sure that we're looking at all those open source components, those log4js, et cetera. We're looking at all of those dependencies that may be called in from the container side as well as the app side. We need to be able to either build or pass, pass or fail a build, depending on the severity of findings and the sensitivity of the apps. We need to do that with SCA. We need to do that with DAST in the pipelines. SAST, I believe that we should be doing iterative SAST, but as well, we should be doing more, kind of like this, like full type of SAST from, one release to another to kind of keep track of exactly what we're finding and then give that feedback to developer security as well. So all of these kind of can be worked into the CI/CD at different levels, right? So we're looking from anything from a developer delivering code to moving through the pipeline, meaning that we're making decisions with SCA and DAST for build fails or build passes. We are doing this continuously. Perhaps we have IAST enabled, where we're looking at the actual request and response and behavior of the application, how the app would behave. And get more accurate testing there, all the way through bug bounties and pen tests and things of that nature. But these processes need to be built into this pipeline, and it's no surprise that our top two integrations these days, and becoming even more and more adopted every day, are our plugins and our integrations directly to Jenkins and Jira being much more development centric and friendly in the native tooling. So the next decade in AppSec, to summarize here, is I think we're going to see the maturing AppSec programs and DevSecOps. I think we're going to see increase in things like automation. I think we're going to see increased type of really emergence or convergence of traditional AppSec and cloud security. I think that far right circle and the far left circle are kind of almost intersecting concentric circles, whereas that convergence of AppSec and cloud will work into that emerging growth and maturation of the AppSec and DevSec programs. Unknown attack vectors is always something that you're going to have to be looking out for, but the known attack vectors are usually going to be a pretty good indicator of the delivery or how the method of those previously unknown attack vectors are addressed, meaning if it's an open source component, etc. The tightening of compliance and regulation, as I mentioned, SBOM, HIPAA, SOC, ISO, etc., PCI, we're going to see increasing government regulation, increasing I would say not only from the various governments and privacy perspective, but also from independent entities, PCI, perhaps even GDPR, et cetera. We're going to see increasing pressure there, not just on SBOMs, but also tightening regulations for not releasing software with CVEs, making sure that everything is inventoried and accurate for licensing and components dependencies. And this is really, if we take a look at these 5 bubbles here, these 5 circles, it is an extremely large amount of space to cover. However, I think that if we look at things like, okay, we let's take the growing importance of AppSec programs on the left, and then the convergence of cloud on the right, and we tie in API there. So we take the far left circle, the far right circle, we throw in API there, and we really focus on making sure our APIs are secured, our APIs are tested, they're developed securely, et cetera. And we are looking at securing all of the traffic that's within those APIs and functionality, and tying those 3 things together, you're going to have a very, very focused, I would say, or at least directionally sound approach for the next 3 to 5 years with those 3 things alone. And then if you know that you are working already to tighten up SBOMs and regulatory compliance, you're going to have like the other part of that equation measured. And what you're going to do there is be perfectly set up to be able to address those previously or possible unknown attack vectors just by doing those things. So I think that in summary, if you take a look at these things that I've mentioned so far and keep them as part of your plan in the next 3 to 5 years and beyond, that it's going to be very, very focused for you, and you're going to be able to deliver much more efficiently for your leadership, your company, and your teams. Thank you very much. I'm now going to take a break as I get a list of questions, and I will give everybody a minute to type in their questions, and hopefully we can get to as many of them as possible. Thank you. Okay, I have my first question. The first question that came in is, DAST is important, but so is IAST and SCA. What are the core differences? How can they work together? Okay, perfect. So yes, DAST is important. I'll get to that in a second. SCA is the software composition analysis. It's looking at all of your open source components, et cetera. It gives you the accuracy of that supply chain components. It gives you the accuracy of knowing exactly what's in your containers, what's in your applications, and knowing and being able to deliver an accurate SBOM. As I mentioned, a huge part of what's coming in the future. IAST is interactive, meaning that what IAST does is it's actually built into the runtime of the application, so it can view the app behavior. Now, what that allows is understanding how not only the request flows into the application, and not only how the response is received, but how the application processes that flow and understands whether the way that information is processed or the way that information is rejected or parsed, et cetera, is vulnerable or is not vulnerable in an extremely accurate fashion as it sits in the runtime and can see that traffic. Now, why is DAST important for this conversation? Because, okay, we're doing IAST, we're doing SCA, we're doing SAST. That's great. Why do I need DAST? Or let's say that why is DAST important? DAST does a few different things a bit differently. First of all of those other things can take place at various stages of the app build or development. DAST is looking at the application once it's compiled and actually deployed, meaning that it's deployed into an environment that has configurations, that has web server configurations, that has identity and authentication authorization pieces identified. It has all of the middleware kind of plugged in. It has the database connections, et cetera. So it's this essentially browsable and configured application as a whole that you can evaluate from beginning to end. I can evaluate the security of the sign-on. I can fuzz the parameters that are being used. I can try injection techniques. I can look at how the database is configured with the responses, and I can try different permutations there to try to get different results. I'm looking at the application as your attackers look at the application. Your outside in may look at the application. I'm testing everything that interacts with that application, and I'm doing so on a continuous basis. Now, all of these need to be automated, all of these need to be continuous, and all of these need to be working together, as I mentioned, kind of in that CI/CD type of pipeline to be effective and grow with your DevOps program in the next 5 years or so. Happy to do a follow-up on just that pipeline in the future, but for right now, I think that's all we have time for with that question. Hopefully that was answered. All right, next question. We saw data theft, espionage, malware, our top concerns. Are there any other concerns that didn't make the cut that you would think are important? Yes, so I think that we look at all of those concerns. I think the attack vector, I think the two areas of attack vector that really need to be concerned there are the APIs and all of the open source components and things that you're using. Yes, you still have to run all of your tests. Yes, you still have to do SAST and DAST. I think the areas of concern there for me that might be just an area to concentrate on are those open source components, are the attack vectors that in which we're coming in, the API functionality, undocumented APIs, that ever expanding attack surface, do continuous discovery as much as possible. There are services and things being spun up in a continuous manner constantly that we really need to be able to address. And that's it there. I have a question on SBOMs. What should the SBOM include? Okay, excellent question. SBOM should include basically an overall inventory of everything that is within your application, everything that is used to build that application. We need everything. We need to understand everything that goes into that. And that includes licensing. That includes the versions you're using, the versions of the components that may be vulnerable, the very specific dependencies that each of those components have, and really solidifying and documenting that what really goes into your software. What's that recipe that you're delivering me? What are all of those tiny little ingredients that may or may not have an attack vector? But we need that list to be 100% comprehensive. That list needs to be very accurate and comprehensive. And that will give you much better control and vision and to be able to see what's directly in your software. I think we have time for one more. I'm going to give one more question here. Glaring skills gap. There's a glaring skills gap in cyber. Talk about the element of AppSec and DevOps in the skills. Yeah. So what we're looking at are a couple of different things. I mentioned this briefly earlier, but the skills gap here is interesting because we need developers in these processes. We need operations professionals, we need automation professionals, and we need security professionals. And we're having a hard time asking these to be one single skill set, right? So someone that's going to need to understand development and security together is hard enough. And then we're trying to formulate teams where we really have ops professionals or DevOps professionals that are really automating and preparing and securing these pipelines and artifacts and really the process from start to finish. So as these skills become so much overlapping and really difficult to find those kind of magic people with the skill sets, we need to be able to converge and focus on those areas and probably collaborate and cross-train as we need to fill that gap. But thank you very much. That's all the time we have today, and I do appreciate everyone for coming, and hopefully you can tune in for my future webinars as we can expand the coverage and talks for everybody here today. Thank you.